The truck driver who defied the mafia boss. One choice changed everything. That single decision made in the span of 3 heartbeats on a rain-soaked highway in Nevada would reshape everything she thought she knew about survival, about power, and about the unexpected places where love finds its way through the cracks of a broken world. Chapter 1. The 18-wheeler cut through the darkness like a steel beast, its headlights carving tunnels of light through the relentless desert rain. Behind the wheel, Elena Vasquez gripped the steering wheel with white-knuckled determination, her dark eyes fixed on the ribbon of asphalt that stretched endlessly before her. The dashboard clock glowed 3:17 in the morning, and she had been driving for 14 hours straight, pushing through exhaustion, because the cargo in her trailer meant everything. She was 34 years old, a single mother of a 7-year-old daughter named Sophia, and she had spent the last 8 years building a reputation as one of the most reliable independent truckers on the West Coast routes. Her rig was her kingdom, her livelihood, the only thing standing between her daughter and the poverty that had swallowed so many people in her hometown of Bakersfield. The rain intensified, hammering against the windshield like thousands of tiny fists demanding entry. Elena reached for her thermos of cold coffee, her 4th of the night, when her CB radio crackled to life with an urgency that made her spine straighten. Any driver on Route 93, this is an emergency. There's been an accident at mile marker 47. Multiple vehicles. We need assistance. Anyone, please respond. Elena glanced at her GPS. Mile marker 47 was just 3 miles ahead. She grabbed the radio. This is Blue Phoenix, independent hauler. I'm approaching the location. What's the situation? The response came broken, scattered by interference and panic. 2 cars, one flipped. Someone's trapped. Please hurry. Elena pressed the accelerator, her massive rig surging forward despite the treacherous conditions. She had been in situations like this before, had pulled strangers from wrecks, had administered first aid by flashlight on lonely stretches of highway. It was part of the unwritten code among truckers, an understanding that out here in the vast emptiness between cities, they were all each other had. The accident scene materialized through the rain like a nightmare-given form. A black luxury sedan had collided with a silver SUV, sending both vehicles spinning across the wet asphalt. The SUV had flipped onto its roof and now lay like a dying turtle, its wheels still spinning uselessly in the air. The sedan had come to rest against the guardrail, its front end crumpled, steam rising from its destroyed engine. Elena brought her rig to a controlled stop on the shoulder, engaged her hazard lights, and grabbed the emergency kit she always kept behind her seat. The rain soaked her instantly as she jumped from the cab, plastering her dark hair to her face, but she barely noticed. Her focus was absolute. She ran to the overturned SUV first, dropping to her knees in a puddle to peer through the shattered driver's window. A woman was hanging upside down, held in place by her seatbelt, unconscious but breathing. In the back seat, a car seat hung at an impossible angle, but it was empty. Elena felt a surge of relief that no child had been involved. "Mom, can you hear me?" Elena called out, reaching in to check the woman's pulse. Steady, strong. She would need to wait for emergency services to be extracted safely. A sound from the black sedan made Elena turn. A man was stumbling from the driver's side, clutching his left arm against his chest. Even in the rain, even in the chaos, something about him commanded attention. He was tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a suit that probably cost more than Elena earned in a month. His face was angular, aristocratic, with a jaw that looked like it had been carved from granite, but it was his eyes that stopped her. Eyes the color of a winter storm, grey with flecks of blue that seemed to hold secrets and dangers in equal measure. He moved toward her with a limp, and despite his obvious pain, there was something predatory in his gait, something that spoke of a man accustomed to being the most dangerous presence in any room. "The other driver," he said, his voice deep and controlled despite the circumstances. "Is she alive?" "Yes, but trapped. I've called for emergency services. They should be here in 20 minutes. Elena stood, wiping rain from her eyes. "You need to sit down. Your arm might be broken." The man ignored her advice, his storm-grey eyes scanning the scene with an intensity that felt almost military. "There were 2 other cars. They followed us, forced us off the road. They might come back." Elena felt the first prickle of unease crawl up her spine. "Who might come back? What are you talking about?" Before he could answer, headlights appeared through the rain, approaching fast from the direction she had come. The man's entire demeanor changed in an instant, his body coiling like a snake preparing to strike. He reached beneath his jacket with his good arm, and Elena caught the glint of metal. "Get behind your truck," he ordered, his voice dropping to something cold and lethal. "Now! I'm not going anywhere until you tell me what's happening." The headlights resolved into two black SUVs that screeched to a halt 100 yards away. Doors opened. Men emerged, silhouettes against the headlights. Kay and Elena didn't need to see the weapons they carried to know this situation had just become something far beyond a simple traffic accident. "Please." The man's voice softened for just a moment, and Elena saw something flash in those grey eyes, something almost like fear, but not for himself. "If they see you helping me, they won't let you walk away. Get in your truck and drive, don't look back." Everything Elena knew about survival told her to do exactly that. She had a daughter waiting for her in Bakersfield, a life, responsibilities. Getting involved in whatever this was could cost her everything. But then she looked at him, really looked, past the expensive suit and the dangerous aura, and she saw the wound on his side that he was trying to hide, the way his breathing had become labored, the slight tremor in his hand that spoke of blood loss and shock. He was going to die here, on this wet stretch of Nevada highway if she drove away. "Get in my truck," Elena heard herself say, the words leaving her mouth before her brain could override them. "Now, move!" The man stared at her, genuine surprise breaking through his controlled expression. "You don't know who I am. You don't know what you're getting yourself into. I know that those men are going to hurt you, and I know that I've never left anyone to face harm alone in my life. Now stop arguing and move, because in about 30 seconds, this is going to become a really bad situation." Something shifted in the man's eyes then, something that might have been respect or wonder or both. He moved, following Eleanor to the cab of her 18-wheeler with a speed that belied his injuries. She helped him up into the passenger seat, slammed the door and ran around to the driver's side. The men from the SUVs had started walking toward them, their pace unhurried, confident. They thought they had all the time in the world. Elena climbed into her seat, released the air brakes and slammed the accelerator. The massive diesel engine roared in response, and the truck lurched forward with a power that no sedan could match. She swung the wheel, bringing the rig around in a tight arc that would have been impossible for a less skilled driver, and pointed the nose toward the darkness ahead. Behind them she heard shouts, the sound of car doors slamming, engines starting. But her rig was already building speed, the trailer swinging behind her as she pushed the vehicle to its limits. The pursuing SUVs tried to follow, but on the wet road, against a driver who knew every trick of handling 40 tons of steel, they had no chance. Elena drove for 20 minutes without speaking, taking turns at random, using every back road and alternative route she had memorized over years of traversing this territory. When she was finally certain they had lost their pursuers, she pulled onto a dirt access road that led to an abandoned gas station. She knew from previous runs, the rain had softened to a gentle mist by the time she killed the engine. In the sudden silence, she could hear the man's labored breathing, and when she turned on the cab light, she saw that his face had gone pale, his lips taking on a bluish tinge. "You need a hospital," she said, reaching for her phone. His hand, still strong despite everything, closed around her wrist. "No hospitals, they'll be watching every emergency room within 100 miles. Then you're going to tell me who they are and why they want you in a state that requires medical attention." Elena pulled her hand free but didn't reach for her phone again. "Because I just risked my life and my livelihood for a stranger, and I think I deserve some answers." The man was quiet for a long moment, his storm-grey eyes studying her face as if searching for something. Whatever he found there seemed to satisfy him, because when he spoke, his voice carried the weight of truth. "My name is Dominic Rossi. My family runs the largest shipping operation on the West Coast, and for the past 50 years we've also controlled most of the territory between Los Angeles and Seattle. What you call organized crime, what the movies call the Mafia, that's my inheritance." He paused, watching her reaction. "The men who attacked us tonight belong to a rival organization, one that's been trying to take over our operations for the past 2 years. They finally decided to go after the head directly." Eleanor absorbed this information with a calm that surprised even herself. She had grown up in neighborhoods where the influence of organized crime was an open secret, where everyone knew which businesses paid protection and which families had connections. The concept wasn't foreign to her, even if facing it directly was new. "So, you're a crime boss," she said flatly. "I'm a businessman whose family has operated outside the law for generations. I've spent the last 5 years trying to transition our operations into legitimate enterprises, to give my children and my nieces and nephews a future that doesn't involve looking over their shoulders for the rest of their lives." His jaw tightened. Tonight was supposed to be a meeting to finalize the sale of our last illegal holdings. Instead, it was an ambush. And the woman in the SUV, my cousin's wife. She was driving a decoy vehicle to draw attention away from my route. I didn't know until the crash that they had found the real target. Elena processed this, her mind working through the implications. She had just helped a mafia boss escape from what was clearly an assassination attempt. She had probably been captured on camera by the pursuing vehicles. And she was now sitting in an abandoned gas station with a wounded man who, by his own admission, was one of the most powerful criminals on the West Coast. "I should let you out here," she said quietly. "I should drive away and pretend this never happened." "You should." Dominic's voice was soft, resigned. "I would understand. You have a life, a family probably. None of this is your fight." Elena thought of Sophia, of her daughter's bright smile and innocent eyes, of the promises she had made to always come home safe. She thought of the mortgage on their small house, of the college fund she was slowly building, of all the reasons she had to protect herself above all else. And then she thought of the look in Dominic's eyes when he had told her to run, the way he had tried to protect a stranger even as his own life hung in the balance. "I have a first aid kit that could handle that wound temporarily," she heard herself say. "And I know a place about 4 hours from here, a cabin that belongs to a friend who's currently working a job in Alaska. We could get there before sunrise, give you time to figure out your next move." Dominic stared at her, and for the first time, his controlled expression cracked completely, revealing something raw and vulnerable beneath. "Why would you do this for me? You know what I am. I know what you are." Eleanor reached for the first aid kit, her decision made. "I also know that you tried to protect me when you had every reason to only think of yourself. In my experience, that says more about a person than their job title." She worked on his wound in the dim light of the cab, cleaning and bandaging the gash across his ribs with hands that were steady despite the circumstances. Dominic watched her with those storm-grey eyes, and something passed between them, an understanding that transcended the bizarre situation they found themselves in. "You're not like anyone I've ever met," he said softly, as she finished securing the bandage. "I'm a truck driver from Bakersfield who made a choice tonight that will probably complicate my life significantly." Elena managed a tired smile. "That doesn't make me special. It just makes me human." She started the engine and pulled back onto the road, heading toward the cabin and toward a future that neither of them could have predicted. Behind them, the rain finally stopped, and the first hints of dawn began to paint the eastern sky in shades of rose and gold. And somewhere in that moment, in the silence between two strangers who had chosen to trust each other against all logic, something began to grow. Something that would prove stronger than fear. Stronger than the boundaries of their different worlds. Stronger even than the danger that was only beginning to circle around them. Check if you're already subscribed to this channel. If you're watching a story about an ordinary woman who risked everything to help a stranger, you need to be here for what happens next. Subscribe now because this journey is just beginning, and you won't want to miss a single moment. Chapter 2. The cabin sat at the end of a winding dirt road, nestled among pine trees that stood like silent sentinels against the Nevada wilderness. Elena pulled her rig onto a flat stretch of ground beside the weathered wooden structure, killing the engine as the first true light of day filtered through the trees. Dominic had drifted in and out of consciousness during the drive, his body fighting the blood loss and trauma of the night. Each time he woke, his eyes would find Elena first, as if confirming that she was real, that this impossible act of kindness was actually happening. And each time, something in his expression softened, a wall coming down brick by brick. Getting him into the cabin was a challenge. He was easily 6'2" and built like someone who had spent years maintaining the physical power that his position demanded. Elena was strong from years of loading and unloading cargo, but supporting his weight while navigating the uneven ground tested her limits. The cabin's interior was rustic but clean, a single large room with a stone fireplace, a worn leather couch, and a kitchen area along one wall. Elena guided Dominic to the couch and helped him lie down, then immediately began building a fire. The mountain air was cold this time of year, and she could see him shivering despite his best efforts to hide his weakness. "There's a bedroom through that door," she said, gesturing to the right, "but I want you stable before I try to move you again. The couch will have to do for now." "Elena," he said her name like he was learning the sound of it, committing it to memory. "That's what you said your name was?" Elena Vasquez, 34, single mother, independent trucker, apparently part-time rescuer of wounded crime bosses. She managed a small smile as she stoked the growing fire. In case you were wondering about my qualifications, you have a daughter. It wasn't a question, but Elena nodded. Sophia, she's 7. Smartest, bravest kid you'll ever meet. She's staying with my mother right now, probably driving her crazy with questions about everything under the sun. What does she want to be when she grows up? The question surprised Elena with its normalcy, its humanity. She had expected interrogation about her background, about who might know her location, about the strategic implications of her choice to help him. Instead, he was asking about her daughter's dreams. Last week, it was a veterinarian. The week before that, an astronaut. This morning, when I called her, she had decided she wants to be a truck driver like her mom. Elena felt a warmth spread through her chest at the memory. I told her she can be anything she wants, but she should pick something that doesn't require being away from the people she loves for days at a time. That bothers you, being away from her. Elena turned from the fire to face him fully. In the growing warmth of the cabin, the color was returning to his face, and she could see him more clearly now than she had in the chaos of the night. There were lines around his eyes that spoke of burdens carried, a silver streak at his temple that suggested he was older than his athletic build implied, perhaps in his early 40s. But it was the depth in those storm-gray eyes that struck her most, layers of experience and emotion that contradicted everything she thought she knew about men in his position. "It breaks my heart every time I leave," she admitted, "but it's the only way I know to give her a life better than the one I had. My father left when I was 3. My mother worked 2 jobs and still couldn't keep us from going hungry some nights. I swore that my daughter would never know that kind of insecurity, that she would always have enough, always feel safe." She paused, suddenly aware of how much she was revealing to a stranger. "I don't know why I'm telling you this." "Because you're exhausted and you've been through something traumatic," Dominic said quietly, "and because despite everything you know about me, some part of you senses that you can trust me, that I would never use what you share against you. That's a big assumption from someone in your line of work." "It's not an assumption. It's a promise." He held her gaze with an intensity that made her breath catch. "You saved my life tonight, Elena. You had every reason to drive away, to protect yourself and your daughter from whatever storm I would bring into your life. Instead, you chose compassion over caution. That means something to me. It means everything." Elena didn't know how to respond to that, so she focused on practical matters instead. She checked his bandage, found it holding, then explored the cabin's supplies. Her friend kept it stocked for emergencies, and she found canned goods, dried pasta, coffee, and basic medical supplies. She made a simple meal of soup and bread, and when she brought it to Dominic, she found him watching her with that same thoughtful intensity. "Tell me about your family," she said, as she helped him sit up enough to eat. "If I'm going to harbor a crime boss, I should probably know what I'm dealing with." A shadow passed across his face. "My family has been in this country for 4 generations. My great-grandfather came from Sicily, with nothing but ambition and a willingness to do whatever it took to survive. He built an empire through methods I won't pretend were ethical, but he also built a community. He looked after people who had no one else to turn to, provided jobs when factories were closing, protected neighborhoods when the police wouldn't. The romantic version of organized crime. The complicated version." Dominic took a spoonful of soup, and Eleanor saw his hand tremble slightly with the effort. "By the time my father took over, the world had changed. The violence that once seemed like a necessary tool became a liability. My father tried to modernize, to move into legitimate businesses, but old habits and old enemies made that nearly impossible. When he died 8 years ago, I inherited not just his position, but also his debts, his enemies, and his incomplete dreams. You mentioned wanting to go legitimate. It's been my mission since the day I took over. I've been selling off illegal operations, investing in legal enterprises, building relationships with law enforcement, and politicians who want to see change rather than just profit from the status quo. In 5 years, I've reduced our criminal activities by 70%. The attack last night was because I'm finally close to getting out completely. There are people who profit from the old ways, who don't want to see the Rossi family become just another American success story." Elena absorbed this, trying to reconcile the image of a crime boss with the man lying wounded on her friend's couch, speaking earnestly about dreams of legitimacy and legacy. "And your personal life? Wife, children?" Something dark flickered in his eyes. "My wife died 6 years ago. She was targeted because of me, because of who I am. They tried to make it look like an accident. But I knew." His voice grew rough. "I have 2 children. Lucia is 15, brilliant and fierce and so much like her mother that it takes my breath away sometimes. Marco is 12, quiet and observant, always watching, always thinking. They live with my sister and her husband during the school year, away from the business, away from the danger. I see them on weekends when I can, holidays, summers. I tell myself it's for their protection, but the truth is, every day I'm away from them feels like a lifetime. You understand, Eleanor said softly, what it means to sacrifice time with your children for their safety. I understand that being a parent means making impossible choices and living with the consequences. I understand that love doesn't make those choices easier, it just makes them more necessary. They sat in silence for a moment. Two people from completely different worlds who had discovered an unexpected common ground. The fire crackled in the hearth, sending dancing shadows across the walls, and outside, the morning sun began to warm the air, burning away the last traces of the storm that had brought them together. You need to rest, Elena finally said, taking the empty soup bowl from his hands. Your body has been through a lot, and you need to give it time to heal. What about you? You've been driving for almost 20 hours. I'll take the bedroom. Try to get a few hours of sleep before I have to figure out our next move. She hesitated, then asked the question that had been lurking in the back of her mind. What happens now, to me, I mean? I helped you escape. I'm sure there are cameras, witnesses. Won't your enemies come looking for me? Dominic's expression hardened into something fierce and protective. I will make sure that doesn't happen. The moment I can safely communicate with my people, I will put every resource I have toward ensuring your safety. You and your daughter will be protected, I give you my word on that. And if your word isn't enough, if they come for me anyway, then I will stand between you and any threat that approaches, not because I owe you a debt, although I do, but because you've shown me something I had begun to forget existed. His voice dropped to something barely above a whisper. Genuine goodness, selfless courage, the kind of person who does the right thing simply because it's right, not because there's anything to be gained. Eleanor felt heat rise to her cheeks and told herself it was from the fire. Get some rest, Dominic. We can figure out the grand gestures of protection after you can stand without falling over. She retreated to the bedroom before he could respond, closing the door behind her and leaning against it with a shaky breath. What was she doing? What had she gotten herself into? Every logical part of her brain was screaming warnings, cataloguing the dangers, demanding that she call the police and remove herself from this situation before it was too late. But another part of her, a part she hadn't listened to in years, whispered something different. It whispered that Dominic Rossi, for all his power and darkness, was perhaps the most genuine person she had encountered in a very long time. That his vulnerability with her wasn't an act or a manipulation, but the raw truth of a man who had been given an unexpected gift and didn't quite know how to accept it. Elena crawled into the bed, fully clothed, too exhausted to care about appearances. As sleep pulled her under, her last conscious thought was of Sophia, of the promises she had made to always protect her daughter. She could only hope that the choice she had made tonight wouldn't be the one that finally broke that promise. She slept for 5 hours, dreamless and deep, and woke to the smell of coffee. When she emerged from the bedroom, she found Dominic standing at the kitchen counter, moving carefully but with more strength than he had shown the night before. You should be resting, she said, though she couldn't deny the appeal of the fresh coffee he was pouring. I've rested enough to think clearly. He handed her a cup, and their fingers brushed in the transfer. Eleanor told herself the spark she felt was static electricity, nothing more. I made contact with my second-in-command. Help is on the way, but it will take time. In the meantime, I've arranged for additional security around your mother's home and around Sophia's school. Discreet, professional, invisible. They won't even know they're being watched over. You did that without asking me. I did what was necessary to ensure their safety, while giving you time to make your own decisions. If you want me to withdraw the protection, I will. But I would ask you to consider that the men who attacked me last night are not the type to leave loose ends. Elena wanted to argue, to assert her independence and her right to make decisions for her own family. But the logical part of her brain recognized the truth in his words. She had involved herself in something dangerous, and pretending otherwise wouldn't make the danger go away. How long until your people get here? Another 48 hours at minimum. The routes need to be secured, transportation arranged. Rushing could lead to mistakes, and mistakes could cost lives. So we're stuck here together for 2 more days. Dominic's lips curved in something that might have been a smile on someone less guarded. I realize this isn't how you plan to spend your week. If it helps, I promise to be a model guest. I can even cook when I'm not recovering from attempted murder. Against her will, Eleanor felt her own lips twitch. You're surprisingly good at small talk for a crime boss. My mother insisted on social graces. She believed that power without manners was just brutality, and that true strength showed itself in how you treated people who could do nothing for you. His expression softened. She would have liked you, I think. She always admired people who acted from conscience rather than calculation. Tell me about her. And so began the strangest 2 days of Elena's life. She had entered the cabin expecting tension, suspicion, the constant awareness of being in the presence of danger. Instead, she found conversation, real, deep, unexpected conversation, about families and dreams, about the weight of responsibility and the price of the choices they had made. Dominic told her about growing up in a world where love and violence were inextricably intertwined, where protection and control wore the same face. He spoke of his mother's gentleness and his father's cold calculation, of learning to navigate between them, of becoming a man who could command fear while still believing in the possibility of redemption. Elena found herself sharing things she had never told anyone. The loneliness of the road, the guilt of being away from Sophia, the dreams she had quietly abandoned in favor of stability and survival. She talked about the father who had left, and the lessons his absence had taught her about trusting men, about the walls she had built around her heart to protect it from being broken. By the end of the first day, something fundamental had shifted between them. The boundaries that should have existed between a trucker and a crime boss, between a mother trying to build a safe life and a man whose world was defined by danger, those boundaries had begun to blur in ways neither of them could have anticipated. On the second night, sitting before the fire with the cabin wrapped in mountain darkness, Dominic reached out and took Elena's hand. "I need to tell you something," he said, his voice rougher than usual. "Something I haven't said to anyone in a very long time." Elena's heart hammered against her ribs. "What?" "Meeting you this time together, it's changed something in me. I've spent years building walls, convincing myself that isolation was the price of keeping the people I love safe. But being here with you, talking with you, I realize how much I had forgotten what it feels like to simply be seen. Not as a boss, not as a threat, not as a symbol of power, but as a man. A flawed, complicated, hopeful man who still believes that goodness exists in the world. Dominic, I'm not asking for anything. I have no right to ask for anything. In 2 days, my people will come and I'll return to my world, and you'll return to yours, and maybe this will become just a strange story we tell ourselves late at night. But I want you to know, whatever happens after this, that you've given me something precious. You've given me hope." Eleanor looked at their joined hands, at the contrast between her work-roughened fingers and his elegant ones, at the way they fit together, despite everything that should have kept them apart. "I don't know what this is," she said quietly. "I don't know what it could be, but I know that I don't want to go back to my life and pretend I never met you. I know that whatever danger comes with knowing you, it doesn't change the fact that I see you too, the real you, and I'm not afraid of what I see." Dominic brought her hand to his lips and pressed a gentle kiss to her knuckles. It was a gesture from another time, courtly and sincere, and it undid something in Elena that she hadn't even realized was knotted tight. "Then we won't pretend," he said. "Whatever comes next, we face it together, as partners, as allies, as whatever this between us becomes. I won't disappear from your life, Elena, not unless you ask me to." Outside, the stars wheeled overhead in their eternal dance, indifferent to the small drama playing out in the cabin below. But for Elena and Dominic, in that moment, the stars might as well have rearranged themselves into new constellations, charting a future that neither of them could have imagined just 72 hours before. The danger hadn't passed. If anything, it was only beginning to close in. But for the first time in longer than either of them could remember, they weren't facing it alone. Chapter 3. The convoy arrived at dawn on the third day. 3 black SUVs that rolled up the dirt road in perfect formation. Eleanor watched from the cabin window as men in dark suits emerged, their movements precise and professional, their eyes scanning the perimeter with the vigilance of those trained to expect trouble at every turn. Dominic stood beside her, his hand warm on the small of her back. He had healed remarkably in the past 2 days, a testament to either exceptional genetics or sheer force of will. His color had returned, his movements had steadied, and the only evidence of his ordeal was a slight stiffness when he turned too quickly. "These are your people," Elena said, a statement rather than a question. "The most trusted of them. My second in command, Marcus, is the tall one giving orders. He's been with me since we were teenagers, more brother than employee. The others are men who have proven their loyalty multiple times over." Elena watched Marcus approach the cabin, his face a mask of controlled concern. When Dominic opened the door, the two men embraced with the kind of fierce relief that spoke of years of shared history. "We thought we lost you," Marcus said, his voice thick. "When the news came about the ambush, when we couldn't reach you." He stepped back, his dark eyes finding Elena with an intensity that felt like being X-rayed. "And this is the woman who saved your life. Elena Vasquez. She's under my protection, Marcus. Absolute priority." Something passed between the two men, a communication that didn't require words. Marcus nodded slowly, then turned to Elena with an expression that had shifted from assessment to respect. "Thank you," he said simply, "for bringing him back to us." The next few hours were a whirlwind of activity. Elena found herself swept up in Dominic's world in ways she hadn't anticipated, asked questions about everything she had seen and heard, provided with prepaid phones and emergency contacts, given assurances that her family was safe and would remain so. But through it all, Dominic stayed close, his presence a constant anchor in the chaos. "I need to return to Los Angeles," he told her, as preparations for departure continued. "There are things I need to address, people I need to protect, enemies I need to confront. But I want you to come with me." Elena felt her heart lurch. "Dominic, I have a job. I have deliveries scheduled, clients counting on me. I know, and I wouldn't ask you to abandon any of that, but your cargo can wait a few days while you see the scope of what you've become part of. And more importantly," he stepped closer, his voice dropping to something meant only for her, "I'm not ready to say goodbye to you. Not yet. Not when I've only just found you." Every logical argument Elena could muster told her to refuse. She should take her rig and drive back to her life, to the safe predictability of routes and schedules and homecomings. She should put distance between herself and this man, whose world operated by rules she didn't understand, whose enemies had already proven their willingness to hurt anyone who got in their way. But when she looked into Dominic's storm-grey eyes, logic seemed like a pale and inadequate guide. "A few days," she heard herself say. "Then I need to get back. Sophia needs me. Then we'll make every moment count." The drive to Los Angeles took 4 hours. Elena rode in the lead SUV with Dominic and Marcus, watching the desert landscape give way to suburbs and then to the sprawling expanse of the city. They passed through neighborhoods she recognized, highways she had driven countless times, until finally the convoy turned into the Hollywood Hills, climbing a winding road that led to a gated compound unlike anything Elena had ever seen. The Rossi estate was a fortress disguised as a mansion. Behind its elegant facade and manicured grounds lay security measures that rivaled military installations, cameras and sensors and protocols designed to keep the family safe from the endless parade of threats that came with their position. But it was also, unmistakably, a home. Eleanor saw evidence of lives lived in every corner, family photographs on the walls, a child's forgotten sweater draped over a chair, their half-finished puzzle on a side table. Despite everything she knew about the Rossi family business, there was warmth here, the undeniable evidence of love. Dominic gave her a tour, introducing her to the staff with an ease that suggested he saw them as family rather than employees. The housekeeper, Maria, looked at Elena with knowing eyes and smiled in a way that made her suspect Dominic didn't bring many women home. The security chief, a mountain of a man named Tony, nodded with gruff respect when Dominic explained how Elena had saved his life. That night, over a dinner prepared by Maria that rivaled any restaurant Elena had ever visited, Dominic told her about his plan. "The men who attacked me work for a rival organization led by a man named Vincent Calabresi. He's been trying to absorb our operations for years, and my push toward legitimacy has made him desperate. If I go fully legal, I become untouchable, and he loses any chance of taking what we've built. So he tried to kill you. He tried to eliminate the obstacle. With me gone, the family would fall into chaos. Old loyalties would fracture, and he could pick off the pieces one by one. What he didn't count on was a truck driver with more courage than sense." Eleanor managed a small smile. "I prefer to think of it as more heart than caution. Either way, it's forced his hand. He knows now that I survived, that I'm aware of his move, that there will be consequences. The next few weeks will determine whether our family survives this generation or ends with me. What can I do to help?" The question surprised them both. Elena hadn't planned to say it, hadn't intended to offer anything beyond temporary support and eventual departure. But sitting here in this beautiful, dangerous house, looking at a man who had shown her more genuine vulnerability in 3 days than anyone had shown her in years, she realized that walking away wasn't as simple as she had assumed. Dominic reached across the table and took her hand. You've already done more than I had any right to expect. The best thing you can do now is let me protect you while I handle this. And if I want to do more than be protected, then we'll find a way. Together." He squeezed her hand. "But first, there's someone I want you to meet." He led her to a sunroom at the back of the house, where a woman in her early 60s sat reading by the light of the setting sun. She had Dominic's grey eyes and his strong jaw, softened by age and by something that looked like hard-won serenity. "Elena, this is my mother, Isabella Rossi." The woman rose with grace, setting aside her book to study Elena with an intensity that felt like it could see through walls. "So you're the one who brought my son back to me." Isabella's voice was warm, but carried the kind of authority that came from decades of navigating a world where softness was often a liability. "I've been wanting to meet you. Mrs. Rossi, it's an honor. Please call me Isabella, and the honor is mine." She gestured for Elena to sit, and Dominic quietly withdrew, leaving the two women alone. "Tell me, Elena, do you know what my son sees in you?" The directness of the question caught Elena off guard. "I honestly don't know, ma'am. We've only known each other a few days. In my experience, time is a poor measure of connection. Some people spend decades together and never truly know each other. Others meet in moments of crisis and understand each other instantly." Isabella's gaze softened. "My son has been alone for a long time. After Maria died, after everything that came with her death, he closed himself off from the possibility of love. He convinced himself that caring for someone would only put them in danger, that the kindest thing he could do was keep everyone at a distance. And now? And now he looks at you the way he used to look at her. Like you're a miracle he doesn't deserve but can't help reaching for." Isabella leaned forward slightly. "So I'll ask you directly, Elena. What do you want from my son?" Elena considered the question carefully. She could give a safe answer, could deflect or equivocate, could protect herself from the implications of the truth. But something about Isabella demanded honesty, and Elena found herself responding with more candor than she had intended. "I don't want anything from him. Not in the way you mean. I didn't help him because I wanted something in return. I helped him because it was the right thing to do, because I couldn't drive away and leave someone to face harm alone. Because," she paused, searching for words, "because when I looked into his eyes that night, I saw a man worth saving. Not a crime boss, not a symbol of power, just a man who was hurt and trying to protect others even at his own expense. And now? Now that you know everything he is? Now I'm confused and scared and completely out of my depth. But I'm also certain of one thing. Whatever this is between us, it's real. It's not fantasy or delusion or desperation. When I'm with your son, I feel seen in a way I've never felt before. And that terrifies me, because I know how dangerous it is to need someone, how much it hurts when they leave." Isabella was quiet for a long moment, her grey eyes never leaving Elena's face. When she finally spoke, her voice was gentle. "You're a good woman, Elena Vasquez. A strong woman, the kind of woman this family needs." She reached out and took Elena's hand. "Whatever happens, know that you have an ally in me, and know that if my son is wise enough to hold on to you, I will do everything in my power to support that choice." That night, Elena called Sophia from a secure line, listening to her daughter's excited chatter about school and friends and the butterfly she had found in Grandma's garden. The normalcy of it was like balm on an open wound, a reminder of the life she had built, the life that waited for her beyond the walls of this beautiful, dangerous mansion. But when she hung up the phone and turned to find Dominic standing in the doorway, watching her with those storm-grey eyes, she realized that her definition of normal might be changing. "She sounds wonderful," he said softly. "She's everything. The reason I get up in the morning, the reason I push through the hard days, the reason I—" Eleanor's voice cracked slightly. "The reason I need to be careful about this, about us. Whatever I choose affects her, too." Dominic crossed the room and stood before her, close enough to touch but not quite touching, leaving the choice to her. "I would never ask you to choose between me and your daughter. I would never want you to, but I also need you to know that if you decide to let me into your life, truly into your life, I will protect her as if she were my own. I will love her as if she were my own. Because loving you means loving everything that matters to you." Elena felt tears prick at her eyes. "We've known each other less than a week. How can you be so certain?" "Because I've spent 43 years learning to read people, learning to distinguish truth from manipulation, sincerity from performance, and because the woman who saved my life on that highway, the woman who cared for me in a cabin in the middle of nowhere, the woman who faced my mother's interrogation with such honest courage, that woman is someone worth being certain about." He reached up and gently wiped a tear from her cheek, and the tenderness of the gesture broke something loose in Elena's chest. "I'm scared," she whispered. "So am I. But I've learned that fear is often a sign we're close to something that truly matters." He leaned down and pressed his forehead to hers. "Whatever happens next, we face it together. That's the only promise I need from you right now. Everything else we'll figure out along the way. If this moment is making your heart beat faster, if you understand what it means to stand at the edge of something terrifying and beautiful, then leave a comment right now with the words, 'Love is worth the risk.' Let me know you feel it too." Chapter 4. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of contrasts. Eleanor moved between the safety of the Rossi estate and the demands of her trucking business. Escorted by security details she was slowly learning to ignore. She made her runs, delivered her cargo, called her daughter every night, and tried to reconcile the woman she had always been with the woman she was becoming. Dominic, true to his word, began the delicate work of protecting both his family and his new relationship. He introduced Eleanor to his children, Lucia and Marco, and, during a weekend visit that left her nervous and hopeful in equal measure. The teenagers were cautious at first, polite but distant, their eyes carrying the wariness of young people who had learned too early that love could be taken away without warning. But children, Elena had discovered, were excellent judges of character. By the end of the weekend, Lucia had cornered her in the kitchen to ask about truck driving, with a genuine curiosity that broke through her cool exterior. Marco, quieter and more reserved, had simply taken to sitting near Elena during family dinners, his presence a silent vote of confidence. "They like you," Dominic said one evening, watching his children laugh at something Elena had said. "They don't trust easily, but they like you. They're protecting their father. I understand that. They're protecting themselves. After their mother," he stopped, the pain of old wounds flickering across his features. "They've been afraid to let anyone new into the family, afraid of losing someone else." Eleanor reached for his hand under the table. "We'll go slowly as they need." Meanwhile, the threat from Vincent Calabresi continued to loom. Intelligence reports filtered in daily, painting a picture of a man growing more desperate as his power plays continued to fail. The Rossi family's legitimate businesses were thriving, their illegal operations successfully transferred to buyers who would face no conflict from Dominic's organization. Every day brought the family closer to the goal Dominic had been working toward for years, which meant every day brought them closer to the moment when Calabresi would have to make his final move. It came on a Wednesday, 3 weeks after the highway attack. Elena was at a truck stop outside Barstow checking her load manifest when her phone rang with a number she didn't recognize. "Mrs. Vasquez." The voice was smooth, cultured, with an undercurrent of menace that made her skin crawl. "Or should I call you Mrs. Rossi? The distinction seems to be blurring these days." Elena's blood ran cold. "Who is this?" "My name is Vincent Calabresi. I believe you've heard of me." "I know who you are. What do you want?" "Straight to business." "I respect that." There was a sound that might have been a chuckle. "What I want is simple. Mrs. Vasquez, I want you to deliver a message to your new friend Dominic. Tell him that his push for legitimacy has failed. Tell him that I have resources he can't imagine, allies in places he never suspected. And tell him that if he doesn't surrender his operations to me within the next 72 hours, I will take everything he loves piece by piece, starting with you and ending with those beautiful children he tries so hard to protect." Elena forced her voice to remain steady. "Threats don't work on me, Mr. Calabresi. I've faced down worse than you on dark highways in the middle of the night. Have you?" "How charming." The warmth drained from his voice. "Let me be clear. I know where your mother lives. I know where your daughter goes to school. I know the name of her teacher, the route her school bus takes, the little bakery where your mother buys her bread every morning. Do not mistake my courtesy for weakness. Mrs. Vasquez, I am simply giving Dominic a chance to end this without more bloodshed." The line went dead. Eleanor stood motionless for a long moment, her heart hammering against her ribs. Then she called Dominic. The next 12 hours were a masterclass in controlled chaos. Dominic mobilized every resource at his disposal, reinforcing security around Elena's family, extracting her mother and Sophia to a safe house under the protection of his most trusted men. He brought Elena back to the estate and installed her in a suite of rooms that felt more like a fortress than a bedroom. "This is my fault," Elena said, pacing the elegant space like a caged animal. "If I had just driven away that night, none of this would be happening." Dominic caught her by the shoulders, stopping her movement, forcing her to meet his eyes. "Listen to me. Calabrese would have found another leverage point eventually. This is what he does, who he is. The only difference is that now he's facing a family that's united, prepared and refusing to be intimidated. Your choice that night didn't create this situation. If anything, it gave us the strength to face it together. My daughter is in a safe house because of me. Your daughter is protected by people who would give their lives to keep her safe. And in 72 hours, this will be over. Calabrese has made his move too soon, shown his hand too clearly. My people have been working on locating his base of operations for months. His threat gave us the last piece we needed. What are you going to do? Dominic's expression hardened into something that reminded Elena of the man she had first encountered on that rain-soaked highway, the dangerous predator who commanded fear with a glance. I'm going to end this permanently. The operation was planned with military precision. Elena wasn't privy to the details. Dominic had insisted on keeping her at arm's length from the tactical discussions, but she saw the constant flow of men through the house, the maps spread across tables, the hushed conversations that stopped when she entered rooms. On the second night, unable to sleep, she found Dominic in his study, staring at a photograph on his desk. It showed a beautiful woman with dark hair and a gentle smile, holding 2 small children. "Maria," he said without looking up. "My wife. She died 6 years ago, targeted by men who wanted to hurt me. I couldn't protect her, Elena. I had all this power, all these resources, and I couldn't keep her safe." Elena moved to stand behind him, her hands coming to rest on his shoulders. "What happened to her wasn't your fault, wasn't it? I chose this life. I chose to continue my father's legacy instead of walking away. Every consequence of that choice, including her death, including the danger to you and your family now, that's on me. You're trying to make it right. You've spent years trying to build something better, to give your children a future that doesn't include looking over their shoulders. That matters, Dominic. It matters more than the choices you didn't know how to make differently." He turned in his chair, looking up at her with something raw and vulnerable in his storm-grey eyes. "How do you do that? How do you see the best in me when there's so much evidence of the worst?" "Because I see the truth. The whole truth. Not just the parts that fit a convenient narrative. You're not a monster, Dominic Rossi. You're a man who was born into an impossible situation and has spent his life trying to do something meaningful with it. That's not evil. That's human." He rose from the chair and pulled her into his arms, holding her with a desperation that spoke louder than any words could. They stood like that for a long time, 2 imperfect people clinging to each other in the eye of a storm, and Elena realized that whatever came next, she wouldn't trade this moment for anything. The next morning, Dominic and his men left before dawn. Elena watched from an upstairs window as the convoy of vehicles disappeared into the early light, carrying the man she loved toward a confrontation that would determine all their futures. She spent the day trying not to think about what might be happening. She called Sophia twice, reassured by her daughter's cheerful voice and innocent questions. She talked with Isabella, whose calm demeanor couldn't quite hide the worry in her eyes. She walked the grounds of the estate, memorizing paths and gardens and the way the light fell through the trees. And she waited. The call came at sunset. Marcus's voice on the secure line, terse but triumphant. "It's done. Calabrese is in custody, his operation dismantled. We're on our way back." Elena sank into a chair, her legs suddenly unable to hold her weight. "Dominic? He's fine. A few bruises, nothing serious. He'll tell you about it himself." She was waiting on the front steps when the convoy returned, her heart in her throat as she watched the vehicles approach. The moment Dominic emerged from the lead SUV, she was running, throwing herself into his arms with a force that made him stagger. "You're safe," she breathed against his neck. "You're safe. We're all safe." He pulled back enough to look at her, and the smile on his face was something she had never seen before, open and unguarded and full of light. "It's over, Elena. Calabrese is facing federal charges that will keep him locked away for the rest of his life. His organization has been dismantled, and as of this morning, the Rossi family is officially, completely legally legitimate. You did it. We did it. All of us. And none of it would have been possible without the courage of a truck driver who stopped on a rainy highway to help a stranger." That night, the entire family gathered for a celebration that felt more like a homecoming than a victory party. Helena watched Dominic laugh with his children, saw the tension that had lived in his shoulders for years finally begin to ease, and understood that she was witnessing the birth of something new. When he found her later, standing alone on the terrace under a canopy of stars, his approach was gentle, unhurried. "I need to ask you something," he said, taking both her hands in his. And I need you to know that whatever your answer is, it won't change how I feel about you. What is it? These past weeks, these extraordinary, terrifying, beautiful weeks, they've shown me something I thought I had lost forever. The possibility of a future that includes love, that includes partnership, that includes someone standing beside me not because they're obligated, but because they choose to be. He took a breath. I'm not asking you to marry me. It's too soon for that, and you deserve to be courted properly, wooed like the incredible woman you are. But I am asking you to consider building something with me, something real and lasting, a life together, your world and mine merged into something neither of us could create alone. Eleanor felt tears sliding down her cheeks, but they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of recognition, of finally finding something she hadn't known she was searching for. My daughter, she whispered. She has to come first, always. She will. She'll come first for both of us. I would never ask you to change your priorities. I'm asking you to expand your family, not replace it. Sophia will have 2 parents who love her, siblings who will protect her, a grandmother who's already planning how to spoil her. She'll have security and opportunity, and a home that will always be hers. And my work, my independence, yours to keep, adapt or change, as you see fit. I've spent enough years controlling people to know that love built on control isn't love at all. I want a partner, Elena, an equal, someone who challenges me, pushes back, helps me become the man I want to be. That's you. That's always been you from the moment you told me to get in your truck and refused to listen to my warnings. Elena laughed through her tears. I was terrified that night. So was I. But you didn't let the fear stop you. You chose courage instead. And I'm asking you to make that same choice now. Choose courage. Choose hope. Choose the possibility that sometimes, in the most unexpected circumstances, 2 people can find exactly what they need in each other. She answered him with a kiss, her first real kiss with this man who had transformed her life in ways she was still learning to understand. It was a kiss that carried all the words she couldn't quite say yet, all the promises she wasn't quite ready to make, all the hope she was finally allowing herself to feel. When they finally pulled apart, Dominic rested his forehead against hers, his breath warm on her lips. Is that a yes? That's a yes to trying. A yes to building something. A yes to giving us a real chance. She smiled up at him. The rest we'll figure out together. Chapter 5. 6 months later, Eleanor stood in the kitchen of a house that had once felt like a fortress and now simply felt like home. The morning sun streamed through windows that overlooked a garden where her mother sat teaching Sophia how to plant tomatoes. Their laughter carrying on the spring breeze. The journey from that rainy Nevada highway to this moment had been anything but simple. There had been adjustments, conflicts, moments when the differences between their worlds had seemed insurmountable. Elena had struggled with the constant security, the loss of the anonymity she had once taken for granted. Dominic had struggled to understand why she still needed her truck, her roots, the independence that defined her, but they had worked through it all, conversation by difficult conversation, compromise by hard-won compromise. Elena had reduced her long-haul runs to shorter regional routes that kept her closer to home. Dominic had learned to trust her judgment, to respect her need for space and autonomy. Together they had built something that looked nothing like either of their previous lives, and yet felt more authentic than anything either had known. Sophia had adapted with the resilience that seemed to be her birthright. She adored Lucia and Marco, who had gradually shifted from cautious politeness to genuine affection, treating her like the little sister they had never had. She called Dominic Mr. Dom at first, then Dom, and recently, shyly and tentatively, Papa Dom, a development that had brought tears to his eyes. Isabella had become the grandmother. Eleanor's mother had never quite managed to be, filling Sophia's life with stories and traditions and the kind of unconditional love that every child deserved. The 2 older women had formed an unlikely friendship, bonding over their shared devotion to the next generation and their grudging respect for each other's strength. And Dominic had become someone Eleanor hadn't known she was waiting for, a partner in the truest sense, someone who saw her completely and loved her not despite her complications, but because of them. He had helped her build a small fleet of trucks, hired drivers who shared her work ethic, created a legitimate business that honored everything she had accomplished while freeing her from the loneliness of the long haul. Today, though, something different hung in the air. Elena could see it in the way Dominic kept checking his phone, in the nervous energy that seemed to emanate from everyone in the household. Even Maria, usually unflappable, had been behaving strangely all morning, humming to herself and smiling at nothing in particular. "All right," Elena said, cornering Dominic in his study. "What's going on? Everyone is acting like they're hiding something, and I'm starting to feel left out of my own life." Dominic's attempt at innocence was thoroughly unconvincing. "I don't know what you mean." "Dominic Rossi, I have spent enough time around you to know when you're planning something. Out with it." He sighed, but the smile tugging at his lips undermined any pretense of reluctance. "Fine, but you have to promise to act surprised." "Surprised about what?" "You'll see tonight." "Just trust me?" She did trust him. That was perhaps the most remarkable development of the past 6 months, the way her carefully constructed walls had crumbled in the face of his persistent honesty and unexpected vulnerability. She trusted him with her heart, with her daughter's future, with all the fragile hopes she had learned to protect from disappointment. "Fine," she relented, "but if this is some elaborate scheme to throw me a party, you should know I'm terrible at acting surprised." Noted. That evening, Eleanor found herself dressed in a midnight blue gown that Maria had mysteriously delivered to her room, escorted by Marcus to a part of the estate she had never seen before. They walked through a garden she hadn't known existed, strings of lights illuminating a path through flowering trees, until they reached a clearing where a single table had been set with crystal and candles. Dominic waited there, more handsome than he had any right to be in a tailored black suit, a single rose in his hand. "You're ridiculous," Elena said, but her voice cracked on the last syllable. "I'm in love," he corrected, crossing to meet her and pressing the rose into her hands. "There's a difference." Dinner was intimate and perfect. Course after course prepared by a chef Dominic had apparently flown in from Italy, specifically for the occasion. They talked and laughed and remembered the journey that had brought them here, the fear and the danger, and the moments of grace that had emerged from the chaos. When dessert arrived, a chocolate confection that Elena barely had time to appreciate before Dominic was rising from his seat and lowering himself to one knee, she realized what this evening had actually been about. "Elena Maria Vasquez," he said, his voice steady but his eyes bright with emotion, "I have spent my entire life being taught that power means never showing weakness. But loving you has taught me that true strength comes from vulnerability, from trusting another person with the parts of yourself you've always protected." He opened a small velvet box, revealing a ring that caught the candlelight and scattered it in rainbows. "You saved my life on a highway in the middle of a storm, but more than that, you saved my soul. You reminded me that goodness exists, that courage comes in unexpected forms, that love is not a liability but the greatest strength any of us can possess. I am not a perfect man. I will make mistakes, probably many of them, but I swear to you on everything I am and everything I hope to become that I will spend the rest of my life trying to deserve the gift you've given me. Elena, will you marry me?" The word came out before she had consciously formed it, rising from somewhere deep in her chest, where it had apparently been waiting all along. "Yes." The ring slid onto her finger like it had always belonged there. Dominic rose and pulled her into an embrace that felt like coming home, like the end of a journey she hadn't known she was on. "I love you," she whispered against his chest. "I love you so much it scares me sometimes." "I know. I feel the same way." He pulled back enough to look at her face, to trace the line of her jaw with gentle fingers. "But we'll be scared together, and together there's nothing we can't face." From somewhere in the garden, Eleanor heard Sophia's delighted shriek as she discovered the fairy lights that had been hung in the trees. Lucia and Marco emerged from hiding, grinning at the success of their secret-keeping. Isabella and Elena's mother appeared arm in arm, both wiping tears from their eyes. And in that moment, surrounded by the family she had somehow acquired through an impossible act of highway heroism, Eleanor understood that her life had become something she never could have imagined. Not just safe, not just comfortable, but truly, deeply, magnificently full. The wedding was held 3 months later in the garden where Dominic had proposed. It was an intimate affair, family and close friends only, a deliberate choice that honored both their desire for privacy and their understanding that the people who mattered most were already gathered close. Elena wore white, a flowing gown that made her feel like someone from a fairy tale, though one with considerably more complicated origins than the traditional princess narrative. Sophia served as flower girl, scattering rose petals with the serious concentration she brought to all important tasks. Lucia and Marco stood with their father, their presence a testament to the family that had formed from the ashes of loss. When Eleanor walked down the aisle on Marcus's arm, a choice that had surprised everyone, including herself, she saw Dominic's eyes fill with tears. The dangerous crime boss, the man who had commanded fear and respect across an entire coast, crying at the sight of his bride. Their vows were personal, written in private and shared for the first time before their witnesses. "You taught me that strength doesn't mean standing alone," Dominic said, his voice rough with emotion. "You showed me that the bravest thing a person can do is choose compassion when caution would be easier. I promised to spend the rest of my life worthy of the courage you showed that night on the highway. I promised to be the man you saw when you looked past everything that should have made you drive away." Eleanor's hands trembled as she held his. "You taught me that building walls around my heart wasn't strength, it was fear disguised as wisdom. You showed me that it's possible to be vulnerable without being weak, to trust without being foolish. I promise to stand beside you through whatever comes next. I promise to be your partner, your equal, your home." When they kissed for the first time as husband and wife, the small gathering erupted in cheers and applause. But for Elena, the sound faded into meaninglessness. All that existed was this moment, this man, this impossible, beautiful future that had emerged from a choice made in the rain on a Nevada highway. Later, at the reception, Elena found a quiet moment to call the truck stop, where her journey had really begun. The elderly attendant who answered remembered her. She had stopped there countless times over the years, a familiar face among the endless stream of travelers. "I'm getting married today," she told him, not entirely sure why she felt the need to share this with a near stranger. "That so?" His voice was warm with genuine pleasure. "Well, congratulations, miss. You've always seemed like someone who deserved good things." She thanked him and hung up, then stood for a moment, watching the celebration unfold around her. Her mother was teaching Isabella a dance from her youth, both women laughing at their own awkwardness. Sophia was being swung around the dance floor by Marco, her squeals of delight audible above the music. Lucia had cornered Dominic and appeared to be lecturing him about something, her expression fierce and protective, and so clearly loving that it made Elena's heart ache. "Penny for your thoughts?" Dominic appeared beside her, having escaped his daughter's interrogation. "I was just thinking about how strange life is, how one choice, one moment of deciding to help instead of drive away, can change everything. Do you regret it?" Eleanor turned to look at him, this man who had transformed her world, who had become her partner and her love and her home, not for a single second. Chapter 6. 5 years later, Eleanor stood at the window of their Lake Tahoe home, watching the sun set over the water. The house had been Dominic's wedding gift to her, a retreat far from the complications of their Los Angeles life, a place where they could simply be a family without the weight of history and reputation. So much had changed in 5 years. The Rossi family business had completed its transformation into a legitimate empire, diverse holdings that included shipping, real estate, and a growing restaurant group. Dominic had stepped back from day-to-day operations, leaving Marcus to run things while he focused on what he called being present for the moments that actually matter. Eleanor had expanded her trucking business into a fleet that employed over 50 drivers, many of them single mothers like she had been, women who needed flexible schedules and fair wages, and the understanding that family came first. She worked from home most days now, managing logistics and hiring while being available for Sophia's school events and family dinners. Sophia was 12 now, brilliant and confident, the perfect blend of her mother's determination and the nurturing stability that the Rossi family had provided. She called Dominic Dad without any modifier, a development that had taken years but meant everything. She had siblings who adored her, grandmothers who spoiled her, and a sense of security that Eleanor had dreamed of providing, but hadn't known how to achieve alone. And there was Leo. Eleanor smiled as small arms wrapped around her leg, and she bent to scoop up the 3-year-old who represented the most surprising gift of her new life. Leo had Dominic's storm grey eyes and Elena's stubborn chin, and he was currently clutching a toy truck that he had refused to put down for the past week. "Mama, watch sunset." "Yes, baby, we're watching the sunset." Dominic appeared behind her, wrapping his arms around them both, and for a moment they stood together, a family formed through impossible circumstances, but bound by something stronger than blood. "Sophia's on her way up with Lucia and Marco," Dominic said. "They're racing, which means there will be arguing, which means dinner will be interesting. Dinner is always interesting in this family." True, but that's what makes it ours. The chaos arrived on schedule, Sophia insisting she had won the race, Lucia arguing about technicalities, Marco serving as an ineffective referee while clearly enjoying the drama. They spilled onto the terrace like a small invasion, and Elena watched as Dominic waded into the fray, not to resolve it, but to make it worse, picking Sophia up and spinning her around while she shrieked with laughter. This was her life now. This beautiful, chaotic, unlikely family that had grown from a choice made in desperation on a rainy highway. Sometimes she still couldn't quite believe it was real. After dinner, when the younger children had been put to bed and the teenagers had retreated to their own pursuits, Elena and Dominic sat together on the dock, their feet dangling over water that reflected the stars. "Happy?" he asked, the same question he asked every night, never taking her answer for granted. "Completely." She leaned against his shoulder. Terrified, exhausted, occasionally overwhelmed, but completely happy. The terrified part. Is that about the new warehouse expansion? The terrified part is about how much I have to lose now, how much more there is to protect. She found his hand and interlaced their fingers. But I've learned that fear doesn't have to be paralyzing. Sometimes it's just a reminder of what matters. You've taught me that. Among many other things. They sat in comfortable silence watching the stars wheel overhead, two people who had found each other against all odds and had built something neither could have imagined. "Do you ever think about that night?" Elena asked. "The highway, the rain, the choice I made?" "Every day. Every single day I think about the woman who saw past everything she had reason to fear and decided to help anyway. Every day I'm grateful that you exist, that you happen to be on that road at that moment, that you're the kind of person who stops when everyone else would drive on. I just did what anyone would have done." Dominic turned to face her, cupping her face in his hands with the same tenderness he had shown from that very first morning in the cabin. "No, Eleanor. You did what almost no one would have done. You risked everything for a stranger. You defied every rational instinct for self-preservation. You looked at danger and chose compassion." He pressed his lips to her forehead. "That's not ordinary. That's extraordinary. And I spend every day of my life trying to be worthy of the gift you gave me that night." Eleanor felt tears slip down her cheeks, but they were the good kind, the kind that came from being truly seen and truly loved. "I love you, Dominic Rossi. I love you. Helena Rossi. Today, tomorrow, and for every day after that until the stars forget how to shine." They kissed under those stars, husband and wife, partners in the truest sense, two people who had discovered that love could emerge from the most unexpected places when you had the courage to let it in. And somewhere on a highway in Nevada, rain fell on empty asphalt, carrying memories of the night when a truck driver defied a mafia boss and changed everything, one choice at a time. The truck driver who defied the mafia boss. The choice that changed everything. This story belongs to you now, to everyone who has ever been faced with a moment where the safe choice and the right choice weren't the same thing. To everyone who has discovered that courage isn't the absence of fear, but the decision that something else matters more. If you've watched this far, it's because you liked this story. Leave a comment saying, "I've watched this far," so I can get to know you and see who really enjoys the stories here on the channel. Your comments are the heartbeat of this community, the way I know these stories are reaching the people who need to hear them. If this story moved you, if it made you think about your own choices and the unexpected places where love might be waiting, then please subscribe to this channel. Hit that notification bell so you never miss a new story. Every subscriber helps us continue creating these journeys of hope and transformation, of ordinary people discovering extraordinary strength. Like this video, if it touched your heart, share it with someone who needs to be reminded that one choice can change everything. Because that's the truth at the center of every story we tell here. You have more power than you know. Every day, every moment, you have the chance to be the person who stops on that highway, the person who chooses courage over caution, the person who changes everything. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. And until next time, remember, the most extraordinary journeys begin with a single, unexpected choice.